Hi everyone, welcome to the session of our web series, Fireside Chat with Champions, in which we interview global business leaders, asking them crowdsourced questions relevant to the biggest challenge we face today, COVID-19 and its impact on various aspects of business and society, and the way we can steer ourselves in current uncertainties. Today we have a special guest with us, Patrick Kelly, author of Millennial Boom and a successful entrepreneur, speaker, strategist in agri produce and supply chain industry. For more than 15 years, Patrick has been dedicated to growing supply chain for growers around the world, honored as Top 40 Under 40. He is also the host of the Produce Industry podcast. Patrick has successfully consulted for more than 3 dozen companies, including Fortune 500 to the small local businesses you find next door. He has trained and mentored leaders in many countries on the upcoming millennial generation and how to be part of a team. He earned his executive master's in business administration from California State University. Thanks, Patrick, for accepting our invitation. I would request you to let our viewers know a bit more about you and your current interests and activities. Floor is yours, Patrick.
Deepak, thank you so much. You explained that very, very well, and I do appreciate that. Some of my favorite things are working with all the generations together to thrive in life and work. You know, a lot of times people go, wow, you really focus on these two generations. Well, millennials and boomers are the two largest living generations in the United States today. So we focus on these two large generations because if you look at data and analytics, they are the two largest spending generations. So I do have a passion to learn and thrive with all generations, especially the upcoming generations that we see today, Generation Z and the Alpha generation that are being formed. So that is, like I said, a huge, huge passion of mine. And also being in the produce and supply chain industry, which is always changing, especially within COVID-19, I have to adapt to my leadership and my executive leadership very quickly all the time, not just within COVID, just being in the produce and supply chain industry as well. So I appreciate Deepak having me on the show today and being able to talk to you and your listeners.
That's very well articulated, Patrick. In fact, I strongly believe that you cannot run for 15 years unless you have a very strong passion of doing what you are doing. So we are pretty sure your heart is at the right place. Patrick, that brings us to our the question answer section. So here I would like to understand someone who has been 15 years trying to create value chains, trying to extend the reach of the growers. The COVID-19 has impacted all what we used to do before COVID, right? The awareness of people about the security of the food, like how safe is the food, that's there. Secondly, you also find that globally, the supply chain have got disrupted, leading to some countries becoming food deficit because they were importing a lot. Now they don't have access to that food. While there are countries like Brazil, they are sitting on piles of food, right? But they're not able to distribute it because the buyers are not there because they cannot export it. What, according to you, there would be impact of COVID-19 on food processing industry with the perspective of both food security and food safety?
That's an awesome question, and I appreciate it. So as I look at it, and I can give the best opinion that I can, as I am from the citrus community, my family has been involved with citrus since the early 70s. And if you go to food packaging and processing, just that has changed a little bit. Before, obviously, there were food safety measures, but now we've taken it exactly to the doorstep, right? As soon as you actually enter the facility, before you go to the office. Now, when I started 15 years ago, I was able to walk into a packing house or a processing center with shorts on, right? Almost no hair nets, no gloves. This is just how it was, right? They call it the good old boys, right? It was farmers, it was processors that, it was trust, really. And we saw that change over the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years through Global Gap, through FSMA, through all these different, I would say, food safety operations that have come into play because of some of the legal standings that we've had, right? We've had a lot of problems with listeria or groundwater that has truly affected the Americans going, wait, should we buy this piece of produce or not? Because they're afraid they might die. And that even affects all the way down to citrus. Even though you peel that skin, people still have to think about that. Well water versus city water, all these things come into play. And then something like COVID happens, where now it's about touching the package, right? If someone sneezed on that package and they were in contact with COVID, now we've got to worry about that, and we can't test for that, right? We could test for the listeria in the groundwater. We could test for pesticides. We could test for a lot of these different things. So now COVID hits us in this food processing industry and packaging industry, and it's made us impact at the door now. So even in the packing house that I currently purchase my citrus and pack my citrus at, they now have installed new washing stations for their employees at the door. They have to take their coats off into a section at the door before it gets into the packing house. So they're eliminating actually more content, right? Their clothes, their hats, everything that would normally be able to walk through the packing house and maybe go to a locker room is now coming forefront of the packing house. And then all the way, go to food processing. If you were to go to a retail store that actually would cut the fruit up or actually make the fruit in the back, all those sections are closed now. I mean, they are starting to reopen, but for over the last month, they have been closed, right? So what do you do when that happens? That starts affecting all levels of that supply chain, and the pineapple industry saw that the most. The pineapple industry, most of their product went to the cut fruit industry that would make fruit bowls or went to canned pineapples, saw a huge decline in their their demand, and their supply just ramped up because of this issue. People weren't cutting as much fruit anymore. They didn't want it touched. They wanted their fruit directly from the wholesaler or directly from the farmer. So that's now impacted how the consumer sees how people are touching their food, their packaging, their fruit. But then even on the production side, it's even seeing how we are handling and packaging our fruit as well. So all the way in the entire supply chain, we are seeing COVID-19 impact our food and fruit processing and packaging.
Perfect. In fact, very granularly explained. So the challenges are that people don't want the fruit which is cut. Now, that brings us to something which is in the same chain of thoughts. The basic mindset of human beings is that actually we need a nutritious food, right? And suddenly we are seeing that a package can be seen as basically a bomb which might explode in your hand, giving COVID to whole of your family, right? So you start seeing that the people, they're becoming over paranoid. That's one part of it, in just the handling packaging. At the same time, even the food habits of the people, suddenly people start, sometimes rumors also, right? Talking about that you can get COVID from chicken, right? So secondly, you find that whole of chicken industry in India just disappeared, right? Overnight.
Yeah.
Do you see COVID creating a lot of unforeseen challenges in the way the people consume food, which will lead to a lot of, I'm saying that upstream issues for the supply chain and the growers? So more on consumption pattern.
I mean, yes, because we're seeing that right now. I mean, there's food loss within the supply chain today because of how the patterns are and how they're actually shifting. So I do believe there's going to be an impact in the future, because as we start looking at food loss today, I think more things are going to switch to, I would say there was just-in-time inventory, but I would believe it's going to go into more just-in-time inventory. So as you're saying about chicken or any of these other products, if there's rumors that happen, each supply chain is going to start taking more precaution on how they shift and pivot so it isn't affected, right? Everybody's going to want to adapt and pivot in the right way. So there's going to be more precautions put on that.
Perfect. So Patrick, actually, there is one more, a viewpoint that all these challenges, as you said, just-in-time movement of food produce, right? That is only possible when you have digital technology playing a role, because humanly it is impossible, right, to have a just-in-time process where, you have to track from the producer, that is the farm gate, till the fork, where the product is, how fast it is moving, what challenge it is going through, whether it was in optimal or suboptimal storage. So all those things lead to need for a huge disruption in the agriculture and food sector in form of digital transformation, right? So how do you see that the adoption of digital technologies in food and agriculture sector, because another aspect is that digital technologies are costly technologies, right? Having an RFID tag on one banana, believe me, is going to increase its price, or a pineapple is going to increase its price substantially, right? So how do you see that, like, when we do the analysis of cost versus benefit, that how the digital technology would be adopted across the supply chain? Also, at the same time, do you think any specific technologies, for example, people talk about all the jargons, AI, machine learning, blockchain, you name it, right? Now, people want everything in agriculture, right? Overnight, they say that, like, we need an AI-based tool which can tell whether the food is optimal or not, or we want to have a fair tracking through blockchain. Do you think any specific technology, according to you, would be having a better, more impact than the others?
That's a fantastic question, and I am a huge advocate for innovation, technology, and I've talked about this with a lot of different people. Even on my podcast, the Produce Industry Podcast, we discuss with AI companies, blockchain technology companies, even temp recording companies that are in real-time transit. And I think that we need to adapt this more into our lives within the produce and supply chain world. I know supply chain does a lot, because if you look at a lot of the large companies that are out there that have tracking devices, have the GPS, have a lot of these things, but they're the ones that have to sell it to the grower. And, I talk a lot about that in my book, Millennial Boom, that the agriculture industry is still dominated by baby boomers who control it, right? And there's still those good old boys, like I said earlier, that want to walk out to the field, get on the tractor, drive around, and really get a feel for what's out there. But I do believe that as we grow and adapt and change, right, as we move into the future, then we need to bring these new technologies on board. Remember, in the early 60s and 70s, fax machine was the best way to communicate. We've now changed to email and changed to text messaging. And the same thing within computer systems. We used to think Excel was the main thing. Now we use databases, right? We use Access. We use Keynote. We use different pivoting, I would say, templates to be able to form what we need today, right? And so I do think that needs to come in and play a part inside what we're doing in the ag industry, right? And yes, there's going to be a cost. Yes, but check this out. I was sitting here the other day talking to a gentleman that has a real in-time transit for temp recorders. And he was saying to me, he goes, think about the people that use the old temp recorders. He said, they can't even access any of that information until the truck lands 4 or 5 days later. Compared to if you had the real in-time transit, yes, that costs a little more because you have to pay for the cloud. But after all, if you look at the over average of the loads, it comes out to $2, $3 more per unit based on the one that doesn't give you real-time data, nor tracks your information, gives you insights. So if you look at that, think about the numbers. We're talking about almost minus pennies on the half a pennies on the dollar. So we need to realize and start adapting these little small things in, just like we did from the fax to the emails, to the Excel, to the Access databases. Small changes, but over time, they'll create better, I would say, better efficiencies for our agriculture industry.
That's, again, very well explained. Here, actually, like, as you rightly mentioned that, like, the typically egg industry is dominated by baby boomers, right? So you'll find they still have apprehension towards transparency. They still like to, like, make business by creating, like, the lack of information. So, right, that makes a lot of people very, very rich. So that mindset, unfortunately, you'll find that still is very much there in egg industry, whether we talk about the upstream or downstream, whether we talk about agriculture inputs or we talk about the commodity buyers. Generally, like, you will never find a 34-year-old innovative technocrat running a company worth a few $1 billion when they're buying commodities from Sudan to Indonesia to India. You have the baby boomers, right? And they are very scared of transparency. In fact, I'll quote you an example. We did a tremendous project for the traceability of saffron in Iran. And believe me, it get very good result. And with the QR code, end user can find when it was harvested, whether it was done in optimal way or not, what time it was harvested, whether it was $14 or $4, which specific farm it came from. And believe me, you will be surprised. People got paranoid that it is too transparent, right? So this is one of your strengths, right, in talking about how millennial and baby boomers can work together. how do we solve this puzzle in agriculture industry?
Oh, sorry, I went on mute there for a second. See,
No, that's
the
fine.
joy,
That's fine.
the joy of COVID.
Working from home
Yeah, I was
is
gonna
always
say
a challenge.
the joy of working from home is you got a couple kids asking
Exactly.
questions. So
That's the fun. That's the fun. Please go on. Please go on.
he is. He's asking. He's moved on to asking his mom. Can you repeat the question, Deepak? I apologize.
Yes, sure. So my question was that actually, as this egg industry is dominated by baby boomers, right, which are generally I found to be a little bit paranoid of transparency, by the people like you and me who are typically millennials or on the border of being millennials and the baby boomers, right? We want to push a lot of fair trade, transparency, right? How do you solve this conflict? Because that is something which is making the rollout of innovation pretty slow or not able to scale up in egg industry.
That is a great question. I get asked that all the time. And pre-COVID, when Hans and I would go speak at corporate events, a lot of the questions we would have is, how do we get the millennials to the baby boomers level? And Hans and I would always rebut and say, no, we got to get the boomers to the millennial level, because the boomers are going to be retiring in the next 10 years. So as I found much success is really, it's about the pitch, right? And it's about how you communicate with them. Hans and I are very big advocates of that. Is when you're talking to a baby boomer that owns an organization or owns these farms, it's like you got to slide in there in a way that you're giving them all the value, but then you're sitting there going, let me help you with this idea. And Hans and I always say they're holding on. They haven't let go yet, and they're going to let go very soon. But it's almost pitching it still, helping them understanding the value of working together with us, right? And that's very hard, because I talked to Trellis AI. They're from Tel Aviv, Israel. They're also in San Francisco. And I said, how are you able to get through to those farmers that say, I don't need your technology, I don't need all this? And he said, that's a huge barrier for us, because there are those old school farmers that believe that it's my job to go out to the field. It's not a technology's job. But he said what's crazy is once they adapt it and they see it, they start to see the true value of how it helps them, right? Just like hiring another employee to take tasks off your overall duties, they start to see that this technology takes a load off of their duties and actually helps them in their day-to-day work. So again, right, I said it a bunch of times, but it's about communication and helping them understanding the value.
That's great, because you have been having expertise in this big challenge the world is facing. Baby boomers and millennial, they need to convert somewhere, and you are doing a lot of work on that, and a great book which you have written along with your co-author on how to make these two people work together. So that's awesome. So Patrick, that brings us to a question of a little bit on you as an individual. You run podcasts, and you create ways and means to communicate with communities, right, using digital tools. How you have coped up with COVID, because you were a little bit more prepared than others, right, because you were already doing those type of things. So what is your mantra that in COVID time, how to be sane, not to lose your nuts while being locked down, while going through all the traumas of your life, right? The business not going great, customer not paying money, employees not turning out, right? So there are a lot of challenges, and someone who has been doing that and with the I'll say that smile and energy in you, it seems that it has not made you worry too much. So we would like to know from you, what is the mantra for doing that?
I would say it's all about your community, right? Think about it like this. Your support group is your biggest, I would say, community, right? And my support group is my wife and my kids. When this COVID happened, my wife's a teacher. She had to work from home. My kids were in school. They had to do online learning. So I was always very fortunate to work from home for these past 15 years. And so this schedule kind of completely changed. So as people were like, oh, I got to get back to work, and this is crazy, I'm not used to working at home, my wife and I built a pretty cool schedule where she worked in the room. I helped my son at some points, dishes, all this dinner stuff. And I'm saying this because one of the biggest things I talk about in my book is marriage and family is a big conflict within work. But if you have the right support system at home, your work will flourish more than anything else. And that's how I'm able to succeed. So yes, have there been downtimes for me? 100%. Have there been bills not paid? Have I had cancel events? Am I down like everybody else is? Yes, in some aspects of my consulting business, we are. In parts of the citrus business that I run, we are not down. Citrus has been a huge mover right now. So at points I could say is it's all about that support system and that mentality. So I try to keep a very positive outlook on how I'm doing things. I set up very, very large goals. As people say, they try to set up maybe 3, 6, 9 month goals. I try to set up a year, 2-year goals and then break these goals down. So it's really, I kind of keep to this core network of, these 5 core areas of how to really control my work environment, work within my marriage and family, use technology, work around my schedules and priorities, and really understanding my workspace over workplace. So I've been able to keep that positive attitude through COVID. And I always tell people, I go, if school gets canceled, as in they're going to go to online learning in August, my life doesn't change. I go, because I work from home, that means my wife's going to work from home and then the kids are at home. I go, so my life changed March 11th to March 13th when COVID happened. I said, so as people are going back to work now, I said, I'm not. I said, I'm still here at home. My wife's still home. My kids are still home. It's summer vacation for them now. So I still have to kind of adapt and pivot all the time, no matter what, and still communicate with the family and still make sure that I'm on both levels of that equilibrium.
Great. And actually, I'm doing a very smart thing. I'm talking to people like you so that I remain positive. So that
right?
I've been doing it for past, since it started. Like, I'm doing a lot of these fireside chats with very, very positive and intelligent people like you, learn from you, and then adopt that. So Patrick, that brings us to the last section of our discussion. Here we are looking for very, very pointed advisory for those founders, entrepreneurs who might be starting up or they have just started in agriculture and food industry. What would be your specific advisory to them, that these are the things they should do, these are the things they should avoid? It could be about the sectors to avoid, it could be the products to avoid. So whatever you feel like, you have 4 or 5 bullet points for them. And on the same side also, your viewpoint for the investors and the other ecosystem players, how they can support these founders and entrepreneurs.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, listen, if you're not in the produce industry and you're looking to get into the produce industry, I always tell everybody, have a passion for food, have a passion for fruit and vegetables. If you don't, we really don't need you, right? I say that all the time because there's a lot of people that are born into this business through their family, but we also need a lot of awesome talent from outside of it. So be passionate about it when you come into it. If you're in the industry now, I would say think about adapting and pivoting to your current situation. I would say a month ago, I would have told you to probably be resilient and reactive. And I think that's where you needed to be, resilient and reactive. Now that we've moved to 2 months through COVID-19, we've seen the effects of a lot of different businesses, how these verticals between retail, food service, how and can affect your business. Now it's time to be proactive and start looking for what customers are taking, how you can adapt now from being resilient and reactive over the last 2 months, sitting back, understanding what has happened, create new opportunities for the customer. I'm going to say this again and again and again. You got to go beyond selling your product. You got to go beyond selling a piece of citrus now. Anybody can do it. Anybody can. All of us have it. There's over 4 packing houses that sell citrus in California alone. Then you look at all the other commodities. They're everywhere. So I'm not going to tell you to stay away from any commodity or any different product. If you love pineapples, get into pineapples, but understand the supply chain of the pineapples. Understand the supply, the demand, the economics of it. Don't just come in trying to make a buck, because if you do, you're going to fail. You're going to fail hard, but you will learn a lesson. So recommendation after recommendation would be have a passion. Know your industry, know your product. you know, again, I can't tell you to stay away from anyone that I haven't done already. I mean, I've had bad experience with certain products that I will tell you I wouldn't touch, but if the opportunity came along, I would sure help our industry and the supply chain in many different commodities. So I think the future of our industry should come from more passion, learning from technology, understanding AI, understanding blockchain, really getting with our farming community and understanding the needs, right? Understanding what they need to be able to communicate and make their sales as well. So I know a lot of recommendations, but I just think that as we work together too, we're going to see a lot better outcomes in the future. We can eliminate food waste if we work together. As I was talking on my podcast the other day, it's how do we have food waste on the production side and then have food waste on the consumer side, but yet there's people all across the world in countries that are starving. It makes absolute no sense. So again, think about ideas. Just because you have an idea and you think, wait a minute, it's already being done, 9 times out of 10, it hasn't been. So speak up, talk about your ideas, talk about your passion, and maybe you can figure out something new within our produce and supply chain to make a difference.
That's great advice to the budding founders and entrepreneurs. I fully believe in what you say, that actually, like, you know, start thinking about the supply chain, start thinking about the farming community, because the stress they are going through, it's responsibility of all of us to ensure that they are not in the level of stress which they are currently today, unfortunately. So we'll have to think on those perspectives as well. And second thing is that we are seeing the climate making agriculture more difficult. So there are a lot of challenges, but that challenges, if you are able to solve, you become a $1 billion company. So that is what we hope, that all the egg startups going forward, they would be able to aspire to be $1 million or $1 billion company. Thanks, Patrick, for your time. It was a privilege having you as our guest. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Take care. Bye.